Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Journey to Greatness. Day 75 of 365 with David McDonald, the GOAT. Haircut. All right. So to begin, we're going to get into our meditation routine. Good morning, Amanda. Top of the morning. Happy Monday. We'll get into our meditation routine, and I will see you all on the other side. Oh, shoot. There goes the tree. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Top of the morning, Liz. Good morning, babe. Auntie Louisa, good morning. All right. Oh, there goes the treat. All right. So we just finished our meditation routine, and now getting into our journaling routine. Today's day 75. All right, I'll see you all on the other side. All right. Welcome back, everybody. I finished my journaling exercise a little bit earlier today, so feel free to Um, just take a couple minutes to close your eyes or continue writing. All right. So, welcome back. We're going to jump into our reading routine. Now, we'll see you all on the other side. Oh, that's pretty cool. Either this bookmark came all the way from Oklahoma, or this book came from all the way from Oklahoma. Nice. I bought it secondhand, so who knows? That's pretty cool. Think about. Jeez. Hmm. Interesting. Mm. All right, welcome back. So now we're segueing into the summary portion of our journey today. A lot of interesting stuff here. Um, so we're continuing the conversation around a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Fixed mindset being that you allow things to define your intelligence. So, for example, if you take a test or an exam of some kind and you don't do so well, then you consider yourself as a failure. That would be an example of the fixed mindset. Your confidence goes down, you feel depressed, you're not qualified, etc. On the flip side, you have the growth mindset. The growth mindset is one who, if they were to fail a test, the question or the notion would be to now go study harder and figure out why it is that you got that score on that exam. But the author now is starting to get into or start talking about how our mindsets change the meaning of failure and what that actually looks like. So, so this runs rampant from how you treat your children from when you're a child. So you get both roles. So how you treat your children or younger people or people around you, and then how children experience failure. So the author talks about a couple, the Roberts. No, the boy's name was Robert. The young man's name was Robert. He was 3 years old. And he was like so bright and so awesome and so great, right? This young kid. And his parents would always brag about him all the way up until the point where he didn't get into he wasn't able to test into like a higher educated or a higher uh, I guess quote unquote a more qualified school program. He didn't make it into the program, and so his parents, cooled down and stopped bragging about him and stopped talking about him in such just in a higher light, which is absolutely ridiculous. But like you're teaching your kid that because you didn't, and children can feel the energy, they can feel this transition. You're teaching your child that they are failures, and then you hold this failure like stamp or this failure flame like over them, which is absolutely like it's just wild. But that's like the way of the fixed mindset, as Carol Dweck, the author, actually defines it as. um so she goes into talking about defining moments like the football player that saw a loose ball on the ground but then ran to the opponent's end zone, which inevitably allowed the opponent to get more points and not his team. And she talks about it was a Minnesota Viking player. She talks about how he went to the locker room, he gathered himself, and then he came back out and played some of the best ball of his life in that second half, which ultimately led to his team beating the other team. So he wasn't in a fixed mindset. He was in a mindset where he was like, okay, I made a mistake and now it's time to make it right. And that's like a really healthy way to live, in my opinion, rather than beating yourself up, not doing well or doing worse because you're allowing these visual or these mental distractions to keep you from achieving your dreams. Now, pull all that and put that into the career choosing category, the work choosing category, like in your personal life, like how does the fixed mindset and the growth mindset apply to you? So, in the fixed mindset, however, the loss of oneself to failure can be permanent haunting trauma. Bernard Lusau, I don't know if that said his name correctly, so excuse me for that, was one of the top chefs in the world. Only a handful of restaurants in all of France received supreme rating of 3 stars from the guide Michelin, the most respected restaurant guide in Europe. His was one of them. Around the publication of the 2003 Guide Michelin, however, Mr. Lassalle committed suicide. He lost 2 points in another guide, going from 19 out of 20 to 17 out of 20 in the Gault Malau. And there were rampant rumors that he would lose one of his 3 stars in the new guide. Although he did not, the idea of failure had possessed him. So he killed himself. You have a man or a person who is so in love with the process of what they do, right? That they earn the right from society, from the public, to be who they are. Have the best and finest restaurants and eateries in Paris, France. And you have a guide, somebody who tells you whether or not you are worth 3 stars or you're worth 2 stars. And the idea of not being a 3-star chef or not being a 19-star or a 20-star or 19-star chef drove him to suicide, killing himself, ridding himself of this planet. Fixed mindset. Rather than, okay, you guys are going to give me 2 stars? Perfect. Why? Tell me why. Let me figure it out. And I will make this better and I will get back to 3 stars. Matter of fact, I'm sitting at a 19-star. How do I get to a 20-star? And you start going into the process of how to get to that next level, right? Same thing with life. Oh, this is life too, but same thing with anything that you do. But hopefully I'm clearly painting the fixed mindset and the growth mindset mentality. And from the sound of the description here, he was a magnificent chef, right? So it's like, you have to be able to see the unseeable. You have this idea of, oh, I lost all my money. Same thing with people in the stock market. There was tons of suicide. Back when the crash happened, tons of suicide. People lost all their investment. They lost everything. And so they're like, well, what is the point to live, right? Like, you might as well just end your life type of thing. And it's just kind of like, there's so much can happen in one day. And a lot of that obviously is dependent on your mindset and the thoughts that you're thinking and what you're creating for yourself on a daily basis. But for most people in the fixed mindset, they'd rather kill themselves or be highly, highly depressed. No opinion on that, other than I wish it didn't happen that way. Honestly. So my success is your failure. So in this section of the book, the author talks about how her and her husband went to go learn how to fly fish. And long story short, the tutorial on how to fly fish wasn't very good. The people who were teaching her, it was an 8-year-old boy. And Carol ended up catching a fish. And her husband came over super excited for her, like, wow, you did so well, this, that, and the other. But then by the end, when they were in the house, two gentlemen came up to her husband, David, and was like, well, how do you feel? How are you taking the loss? Or like, how are you taking the scenario? And David was like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you asking me? And the men were asking him, like, how are you feeling that your wife caught a fish and that you didn't? It's just kind of like what? That doesn't make any sense. I'm happy for her, right? So, fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Hopefully, I'm clearly, painting this out. Shirk, cheat, blame, not a receipt for success. Beyond how traumatic a setback can be in the fixed mindset, this mindset gives you no good recipe for overcoming it. If failure means you lack competence or potential, that you are a failure, where do you go from there? In one study, seventh grader told us how they would respond to an academic failure. A poor test grade in a new course. Those with the growth mindset, no big surprise, said they would study harder for the next test. But those with the fixed mindset said that they would study less for the next test. If you don't have the ability, why waste your time? And they said they would seriously consider cheating. If you don't have the ability, they thought, you just have to look for another way, which is very, very interesting. Now, I studied sociology, right? So I know, like, when you're doing surveys and you're doing tests, or you're taking like samples of, certain when you're doing tests of certain samples, and depending on the certain sample size, you can't scale that to all of the population. Um, some people said they would consider cheating, but it's like, if you were to apply that to real life, where it's like, would you rob, steal, and cheat somebody else in real life and then take the chance of going to prison versus cheating on an exam and potentially getting kicked out of a school, right? So it's like, when you weigh the pros and cons, sometimes it's hard to correlate the information. But from what she's saying is, like, some people would consider cheating, which is interesting because on items or things that you can cheat on where the consequences aren't so significant, I believe that, I could see how, people would come to that point of, well, I'm not going to study harder, I'm just going to cheat. And oftentimes we see that, which is really interesting to me. Very interesting study nonetheless. So another way people with a fixed mindset try to repair their self-esteem after a failure is by assigning blame or making excuses. Let's return to John Enroe. It was never his fault. One time he lost the match. So there was a tennis player that the author mentions, and he said, oh, the reason why I lost the match was because the CNN reporter on the side took his headset off, and there was like waves or energy or noise coming from that side of the court, and so I couldn't focus. I don't think that's a valid excuse. Excuse nonetheless, though. You got to be focused when you're on the court, right? If you're going to win, the best players are focused. There's nothing that can distract them. And as Relentless Tim Grover says, they're in the zone. And when you're in the zone, nothing can break your focus. Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, etc. So just to give you an idea of people who were always in the zone while they were balling. It was never his fault. One time he lost the match because he had a fever. One time because he had a backache, etc. You're making all these excuses for your reality, when in reality, the excuses are not setting you free, and you have to just own them. And they say, John Wooden, the legendary basketball coach, says, you aren't a failure until you start to blame. What he means is that you can still be in the process of learning from your mistakes until you deny them. So the moment you start denying your reality, the moment you start making excuses for your behavior, is the moment that I'm not going to say you become a failure, but you start blocking your blessings to learn from that experience and grow from that experience, so that you're not in that same place, and so that you can evolve into, obviously, like you can evolve into a better space. And then they talk about Enron, so mindset and depression. So the question may be, maybe Bernard, that French chef was depressed. Um, as a psychologist and an educator, Carol Dweck, that's who we're talking about. I am vitally interested in depression. It runs wild on college campuses, especially in February and March. And so pretty much that is what we're going to get into tomorrow. The level of depression and mindset and those things. So we'll check that out and then continue the story tomorrow. So today is the 14th. So we're going to read out of the Best You Ever book to conclude. And the title of this passage is Need Courage? God Can Give You It. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord is the one who goes before you. He will be with you. He will neither fail you nor forsake you. Deuteronomy 31:8. As you take the next step on your life's journey, you may discover that life can be difficult and discouraging at times. During our darkest moment, God offers us courage and strength if we turn our hearts and our prayers to Him. As believing Christians, we have every reason to live courageously. After all, the ultimate battle has already been fought and won on the cross at Calvary. But sometimes, because we are imperfect human beings who possess imperfect faith, we fall prey to fear and doubt. This is true. We shouldn't beat ourselves up about it all the time. Fear and doubt. The answer to our fears, of course, is God. The next time you find your courage tested to the limit, remember that God is as near as your breath. He is your shield and your strength. He is your protector and your deliverer. Call upon Him in your honor of need and then be comforted. Whatever your challenge, whatever your trouble, God can handle it. Our Lord is searching for people who will make a difference. Christians dare not dissolve into the background or blend into the neutral scenery of the world. Charles Swindoll. Building a better you. Is your courage being tested? Cling tightly to God's promises and pray. God can give you the strength to meet any challenge, and that's exactly what you should ask Him to do. Not only is it powerful to call on God, but call on yourself, because you are an extension of God. So therefore, you have the ability to create this wonderful thing that we call a reality. And at the end of the day, I think the most important thing to remember is that your world is the way that it is because of you. And the moment that you take responsibility, the moment that we take responsibility as a people, the moment that our society gets better, the moment that we become better as people individually. And so it all starts with the individual. And then as I can show or maybe exemplify to some degree, that I'm responsible for my actions, then I can share that perspective with other people, and then they become responsible for their reactions and the way that they live their life. And then as a collective now, all together now, now we all are, responsible for our actions, and therefore improving, I think, the social currency of our society, making our world a better place. So at the end of the day, fixed mindset versus growth mindset. I prefer the growth mindset. I will say that every single time because that's what I prefer. But with that, thank you everybody for joining me. Day 75 of 365 with David McDonald, the GOAT, on the Journey to Greatness, Season 2. And I will see you all tomorrow at 5 a.m. Good morning, Brandon. Top of the morning, brother. All right. Thank you, guys.